road.
Yeah.
All right, we are going live on YouTube. And it is a pleasure to be with everyone once again for a study of the Talmud. I'm trying to find where we're supposed to. Oh man, this is so funny. I was just learning this in a different context another day, so we're going to start here in Brachot 20a. But first, for those joining online, we're going to say the blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. You say amen, you get full credit. My apologies, I am not, as you can hear, I am recovering from being ill. And my voice is still on the recovery element. But I am wearing a nice springtime shirt today, so we are ready to begin. Okay, let me share my screen for everyone. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan was a mad lad. What I mean by that is he was a little bit, as the kids would say, unhinged. He would do really weird stuff, but he was a very powerful and famous and learned rabbi. So, as would happen with some of the powerful, famous rabbis, we get a little bit like, if you're with us in our books of the Nevi'im and stuff, where we're reading a little bit of a prophet story almost, a little bit of like, let's have some power, let's use something God gave them the ability to do, and let's see them use that power in the world and shape the world using them. And Rabbi Yochanan did something today. If you did this, they would arrest you, by the way, in Israel. If you tried to do this, they would arrest you. The first line, Rabbi Yochanan, Hava, so what he would do, Hava Ragil, he had this usual pattern. Dahava Ka'azil V'yatev Asha'arei Ditvila. And what are Asha'arei Ditvila? They are mikvahs. Ditvila, tvila, immersion, right? These are mikvahs. What would Rabbi Yochanan do? What was his usual pattern? His usual pattern was to go and sit at the gates of women's mikvah immersion sites. Maybe this would be a mikvah. In the old days, in Rabbi Yochanan's time, sometimes it would literally be like a stream that was pretty protected and private where people couldn't see, but there'd be like a little path to go down to it. And Rabbi Yochanan would go and he would sit there. Now, don't do this. Again, if you're in that pattern of like camping outside mikvahs in Israel, the police will come to you, the mishtara, and they'll be like, hey, you're a man. What are you doing here? Go somewhere else, right? They'll be like, move along. If you say no, they'll arrest you.
This is not Talmud, but it reminds me when I interned, the interns would go out in the ambulance and answer the call. And I got a call one day with the ambulance did to the locker room. I'm sorry, let me back up. The police would escort the ambulance wherever we were going, so we'd get through quickly and easily. The call was to the woman's locker room at Vic Tanny's. That police officer escorted me all the way down into the locker room. Yeah.
Perfectly good. Now, the other thing I must remind you, which the commentator will remind you, and I've told you this before, what is the number one thing we know about Rabbi Yochanan? Don't look at the screen.
Handsome man.
He was very pretty. He was so pretty, right? What is his best friend and brother-in-law and maybe, don't mean to offend the internet, but sexual partner, Reish Lakish, say? Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish is his name, but we call him Reish Lakish. And how did they meet? Does everyone remember the story? Reish Lakish was a brigand on the road, and he sees Rabbi Yochanan bathing in the river, and he thinks he's a woman, and he goes to assault him. because he says, "You're so pretty. I'm going to have you here in the river." And he turns the guy around and he says, "Oh, you're a man." It's like, "You're a man from far. You look like you're a man." It's like, "Yeah, I am." And he goes, "Your looks should be for women because you're so pretty. I thought you were a woman." And what does Rabbi Yochanan famously say back to Reish Lakish? He's like, "You brigand, former gladiator, your strength should be for Torah." And he then teaches Reish Lakish Torah and makes him into one of the finest Torah scholars of his generation, and becomes the chavruta of Rabbi Yochanan. It's a great story. It starts with a little bit of sexual assault, but just a little bit, and then we move on from that. They're fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it too much. Okay. Anyway, it's important to know just how pretty Rabbi Yochanan is. That his best friend and eventual brother-in-law met him by trying to have sex with him because he thought he was so pretty. Not, again, something you should do in real life. Don't do anything Rabbi Yochanan or Reish Lakish did in real life. Best to avoid today. Anyway, Rabbi Yochanan, who was known for his extraordinarily good looks, explained this and said, he taught, when the daughters of Israel emerge from their immersion in the mikvah, they will look at me and will have children as beautiful as I. What is he saying?
Like never happened in the world before.
He's saying these women, why would this be important? Why would he be doing any of this, first of all? What is the number one reason these women would visit the mikvah?
After their period.
Yes, after menstruation, in order to have relations with their husbands again, in order to be made pure, a woman must go to mikvah, right? Mm-hmm. I love how the Orthodox teach mikvah to young girls, by the way. They teach them all the stuff we would do about how it's a personal spiritual experience, and you get to do this, and you get to say all these different things and try this, and it's beautiful. And then the day before they get married, they're like, "By the way, you have to go you have to do this stuff because all that stuff we told you, not the point. The point is there's a ritual purpose to this, and you got to do that." Anyway, it's just interesting how people do things. But he says they will go because it will be the time when they need to do that, and they'll be thinking about anyway going home and having sex with their husbands. And after they look at me, first of all, they'll be like, "Ooh, pretty man. Makes me think, gets me going," right? That's what he's essentially saying. Is it'll get them going, and then they'll have kids. This is the part that's like the kind of prophet magic kind of stuff I'm talking about. He asserts that they will then have more beautiful children because they looked at him before they conceived their children. And so all the children of Israel will be more beautiful because he sits outside the mikvah all day.
I'm being very noisy.
But no, go for it. Somebody's got to say something. This is crazy stuff.
Yeah, the interject a point that we covered yesterday in Kabbalah. Jacob works for Rachel, but he finds Leah in his bed. He wakes up the next morning and he's made love to Leah instead of Rachel. And the Kabbalah goes into a whole explication of how it's a sin to make love to one woman while thinking of another. Okay, and what happens to the progeny if you do that? Well, here's the rabbi saying when they make love with their husbands, they'll be think of me and my beauty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is very interesting. I'm just trying to find something before I go. Is it Anabisha?
Just out of curiosity, where can we read up on about all these different rabbis?
So first of all, you could read, if you want the big compendium, you could get Sefer HaAgadah, his English translation, the Book of Legends, sort of. It's like a collection of Aggadic stories. There are also individual books written about some of these where they compile stuff and write about them, and I can give you some of those books if you want. I mean, I don't have the books on me probably, but I can give you the names of the books for you to get. But there are separate books about. Now, Some of these Sfarim are just in Hebrew, so if that's a problem, let me know. I'll have to find specific. Some of the best writing on the Talmud is not in translation, unfortunately. So you'll have to either know Aramaic or Hebrew really, really well, or be willing to sit there with a BDB, with a what do you call it? It's not a compendium, for translation. I forget the name of it. Concordance. And or a dictionary, and the concordance is better often because it'll give you the semantic range based on different places it appears in our corpus. But the dictionary is good too. Okay. So when they emerge from their immersion, they will look at me and will have children as beautiful as I. The sages asked him. The other rabbis said, Master, again, they have a lot of respect for Rabbi Yochanan. He's one of the top rabbis of his generation. So they could say, Master, do you not fear the evil eye? Again, this idea that the appearance of the thing will corrupt what you're doing, even if what you're doing is pure, is a huge overriding fence in Jewish tradition. It's why chicken isn't parv. Chicken parm isn't kosher, not because Mishnah Chulin thinks that chicken really looks like meat, but because people might see you eating chicken and assume it was meat, and then you might eat it with something it's not, that it's allowed to be with halakhically, technically, but isn't because of the appearance of the thing.
So the evil eye is not a demonic spirit. It's what people think of you. Is that what the evil eye means?
Not in every instance. In this case, it's that the way what you do and how it appears is sometimes more important than the truth of the matter.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were going and you were like, I am not benefiting at all by this 20 pounds of pork ribs I'm carrying. I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to cook it. But I found it, and I'm going to go donate it to these goyim who will eat it. They eat pork, and it's fine for them to do so. They're not required to abstain, and they go hungry otherwise. I'm feeding the poor. There's nothing halakhically wrong with bringing it to a shelter for non-Jews and saying, here, cook all of your, now you can have a beautiful, lovely meal for free that a Jew gave to you. Why can I not do that? Because people might see me carrying 20 pounds of pork ribs around with me and assume I was going to eat it myself. Better to avoid. Even though the other people don't get to eat? Yes. That's what the tradition says. So they're saying, in this case, it's more, hey, aren't you worried? I'm interpreting this, aren't you worried as that people will see you sitting outside the mikveh and assume that you're going to prey on naked women, or you're trying to peep on naked women at the mikveh, which you're not obviously allowed to do. And what is he saying? That's a good question. Mm-hmm. I just described to you how important it is not to appear to be doing something like that. So what could convince him it's worth it, even with the risk? He said to them, I descend from the seed of Joseph, over whom the evil eye has no dominion. As it is written, Joseph is a bountiful vine on a spring. From Genesis 49. I can mean spring and obviously I. So, and Rabbi Abahu said, this is just sermonizing here. Rabbi Abahu said, do not read it alei ayin, rather ole ayin, or above the eye, that the seed of Joseph transcends the influence of the evil eye, right? Not that he's not affected by it, but just he can overcome it because he's the seed of Joseph. Isn't that interesting? If only I knew whether, no, I'm not even going to go there. I was like, if I was the seed of Joseph, it's really not a good, don't get in the habit of praying on, thinking about the mikvah like that.
I'm thinking of your contribution yesterday, Joseph and the wife of Potiphar.
Oh,
Sure.
when did you guys come out?
I'm sorry,
When did you decide? What was the answer?
I don't think we had an answer. We just had a discussion.
No.
Um,
Is she trifling or
oh,
is he a rapist?
oh no, she's trifling.
There you go. Good. Yes, we will. Right. She pretends that he's going to do something to her, but of course, Joseph was never going to do that.
But the plan God had to make Joseph prominent came because of his imprisonment.
Yes, of
So
course.
she got him in prison because she claimed he raped her. And
Yeah.
and then he could make the interpretation of the dreams of the baker and the cotton.
Yes, once in prison, he
And
could
which,
use his
After
abilities.
a long time, they finally said, let's call him up for dream interpretation.
Not until they needed him, right?
That's
Only
right.
when they needed him.
But he wouldn't have gotten there, I think, without that. And it is a way of saying, hey, God's plans we don't always understand.
For sure, the Joseph story is among the greatest of, and quite frankly, is why Christians like the Joseph story so much more than the other stories from Genesis and Exodus.
Yeah.
Right? And there's even that song in the so after they made The Prince of Egypt, which if you haven't seen is a cartoon, but it's maybe the best biblical movie of all time. The Prince of Egypt is about Moses and the Exodus.
Mm-hmm.
DreamWorks made another movie after this huge success of that called Joseph, King of Dreams.
Okay.
Which was in the same style and also had a pretty decent cast and not as good music, a little bit of good music. One of the songs was called You Know Better Than I, based on this idea that Joseph gives himself up in prison to the idea that God has a plan and that he'll be an instrument in it, and he just has to wait and bide his time for God to call him to the scene the way he's meant to be. But that's a thought that's very appealing to Christians, which is not as appealing to Jews. This idea, generally, this idea that we should just wait for a moment God has ordained and not work to improve the world as it is, because that's what we're supposed to do.
Sure.
So we're supposed to be autonomous, and this takes away autonomy in a way and puts it into God's hands, which we're supposed to work with God, not just sit there like lumps and wait. So there's a little bit, Christians like that story a little bit more than the Jews do.
Okay, but there's the thought of being in rhythm with God's ways.
Sure, of course.
In both religions.
And I thought yesterday Kabbalah was going out of its way to make the point that what really matters is God's spiritual plan. And sometimes that will be worked out, even if it causes human difficulties, deaths. That's just collateral damage. And I think that's a point you've made with us in Torah study.
For sure. Okay. So here we're going to keep talking a little bit about the rabbis. What's most interesting to them about this story? Not the mikvahs in it. That might be most interesting to us, but that's not what's most interesting to the rabbis. To the rabbis, what's most interesting is this idea that maybe some Jews are magic. The seed of Joseph isn't affected by the bad, right? And we're going to get a different teaching later, which I like better. The Talmud will teach us that ein mazal beYisrael, that there isn't fate in the kind of star worshiper, that we don't believe in like horoscopes or star signs, this kind of thing. Sorry. Okay. Rabbi Yossi, son of Rabbi Hanina, cited a different proof, and this is from Jacob's blessing of Joseph's sons. If you remember, Joseph gets the double portion, so he doesn't get a blessing. His sons both get blessings equal to his brothers. That's how he gets a double portion. Where he says, the angel who redeems me from all evil shall bless the young, and in them may my name be recalled, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac. And may they multiply, vayigu, in the midst of the earth. Vayigu is related etymologically to the word fish, which is dog. So vayid gu, the gu. Just as the fish in the sea, water covers them, and the evil eye has no dominion over them. So too the seed of Joseph, the evil eye has no dominion over them. Ayin hara is how we're saying, just very simply. So what are they saying? They're saying here's another proof text, a different proof text, and it's this line from the blessed. Where's a better place to get a proof text for this than the blessing that Jacob gives to Joseph's sons? If you're saying that Joseph's sons and all their future descendants have some special protection from the evil eye. The place that would come from, he says, would clearly be the blessing that was given by their grandfather Jacob. I like how it's like the fish, and we're getting Vayid Gu to be like, so there's a connection to fish here. And because of that, and because fish don't have that, this is clearly saying that the Ayin Hara has no impact over the seed of Joseph. Not all of Jacob's children, just the ones who went through Joseph. So if you're a descendant of Joseph, the tribe of Ephraim or Manasseh, then you supposedly have some special protection from the Ayin Hara. Today, I don't think many people know if they're the tribe of Ephraim or Manasseh. The only Jews today who seem to have any recollection of what tribe they're part of tend to be the Levites, because of how their separateness was observed over the millennia in diaspora, in synagogues, etc. In Reform synagogues, I do not call up Levites or Kohanim. Traditionally, the three categories that we call up for Aliyot on Saturday mornings. We call up the Kohanim, we call up the Levites, and we call up Yisrael, everyone else, basically, the people of Israel. So if you're a Kohen or a Levite, you probably know that if you went to shul with your father. If you're Reform, you probably don't, because we, again, don't call people up based on their blood. We don't believe that any Jew is worth more than any other Jew based on their blood. But it's a remnant of the temple, and some Jews do hold to it. Yeah.
Well, isn't superstition more associated with pagan religions?
Superstitions are very much associated with pagan religions, which is why I taught you Ein Mazal Yisrael, which is where the Talmud will come in and say, none of this shtuyot, none of this nonsense has anything to do with your life or the way you practically live, or, it's just you're not affected by these things, which is meant to root out superstition. But superstition is a part very much of the Talmud. The Talmud invokes amulets and magic sets of words. And amulets in Jewish tradition are, if you've ever seen a Jewish amulet, it's literally phrases written in a spiral. It's beautiful, actually. In fact, give me the round one. Some of these are not amulets. Some of these are just things they're selling. This is a very common one, which just has words and stuff written. Often you'll actually see them, really old ones are written in concentric, are written spiraling inwards. This one is just straight up. I can't find. How do I do this?
And the purpose of an amulet is to ward
Protect
off
them,
evil
yeah.
spirits? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And there were assigned me one of them.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, here we go. This is what I'm talking about. You see them here. You see how it's round,
Sure.
and all that. Terrific. Okay. So, and you would wear it, and it would have some text or some specific
Sure.
I mean, we still do things like this. If you get a talit, you might have a certain phrase or line from the Torah on your Torah. It's different, but the same. Um, and they add here, and if you wish, you could say instead that the eye of Joseph, Joseph's eye, which did not seek to feast on that which was not his, which is Potiphar's wife, the evil eye has no dominion over him. So what does this mean? It might not be about blood, they're saying. It might be about whoever is like Joseph and does not have a wandering eye. And for him, he's not affected by Ayin Hara because he is so known not to break boundaries.
He's master
That-
impulse. Yeah.
Right, that in some ways we consider him to be non-aggressive, I guess you could put in this instance. We consider him to be holy enough to not be a lech or a or an assaulter or some kind of terrible thing.
That'd be the difference between a tzaddik and a Bino-Ni if you.
It's certainly a tzaddik would certainly be this kind of person. So this is where it's saying it might not be about blood. It might not be that so in other words, here we're saying the Talmud, the Stamaitic voice, the general voice of the Talmud is saying, if you wanted, you don't have to see this. Even what Rabbi Yochanan said in terms of blood or identity. You could see that anyone who takes on the likeness in that way of Joseph is one that is like that. So he's saying, I don't have to be of Joseph's literal seed to be a descendant of Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
He's a spiritual descendant of Joseph. Not a physical descendant, not a blood descendant of Joseph.
That actually makes sense.
And that's why they said, if you wish, you could say that, which is a nice wrap up here for them. I love the Orthodox non-bold in this line is doing a lot of lifting. We're not going to include it this time though, because it's silly and stupid. Women, slaves, and minors. This is the Mishnah. The Mishnah, we're done with what we were just talking about. Now we're back in the Mishnah, and the Mishnah says, Nashim, Va'avadim, Uktanim. So that's Nashim, women, Avadim, slaves, and Ktanim, or children, little ones, minors. Piturin, Mikrat Shema. Right? They're exempt, Pitur, from the recitation, from Kriyat Shema, from the recitation of the Shema.
Mm-hmm.
I like how it says, women, slaves, and minors who have parallel obligations in very. We're lying to you. Is lying. It's lying to you. It's lying. The parallel implies separate but equal. That's not real. There is no separate but equal tefillin or Kriyat Shema thing. They're just saying women don't do that. Women and slaves and children don't do this, and only men do. They don't really need a reason. This is apologia, is what I'm saying. They're doing apologetics for orthodoxy. You'll see orthodoxy do this a lot now because we're in the 21st century. And they'll say, oh yes, the women, they're so holy already, or they don't need to do what we do with tefillin and prayer and stuff. Or they'll come up with all kinds of backbending, whatever, to explain why the rabbis said women weren't qualified to do this. It would be more honest if they were just more honest. I would appreciate if they were just more honest. But of course, hard to get by in the 21st century if you're that honest. If you say women are intellectually similarly capable with slaves and minors, you're making a pretty offensive statement. There's no bones about it. You could do what we did and just say, you know what? That's kind of stupid. We're going to say that women are maybe not obligated. We don't want to break tradition. We'll say that that Patur, what Reform Judaism and Conservative Judaism and Modern Orthodoxy in some cases does, is say it's not that women can be Patur, they can be exempt, but that means they can opt in. They can choose to be bound by it, as opposed to men who don't get a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this version would say they can't choose. They've been ruled patur, which means they don't do it. If you're patur, you don't do something. You would never take on a stringency that you're not supposed to.
So it's not exempt, it's excluded.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Exempt means not allowed.
Yeah.
But again, they will translate it and interpret it now to be exempt, like, oh, they don't have to. But they don't have the option to opt in. We give them that option, and we don't have slaves today, so that's not necessary. Nobody worries about that part because there are no slaves in modern countries Jews live in. And small children, we all still agree with, by the way. Small children are still not supposed. We train them to do it so that when they become bar mitzvah in the Orthodox world, they will do it. But they don't have to do it. If they don't wake up at 6 a.m. and say Shema, they don't have to. It's okay. They're not in trouble in any way. But it's not just recitation of Shema, because we get on 20b. Umin hatfilin, v'chayavin bitfilah, uvim zuzah. It's hard because it's and in mezuzah. So it's uvim zuzah, uvirchat hamazon. So women, slaves, and minors are exempt from Kriyat Shema and Tefillin. But what are they obligated in? What are they supposed to do? Tefillah, mezuzah, which, to be fair, mezuzah is everybody who lives in a house. But if a woman lives alone, she's also still required. She's chayava. She's required to put up a mezuzah and birkat hamazon, grace after meals.
Mhm.
But the mitzvah of prayer is not the same mitzvah of prayer as men. By the way, they don't have to say all the same prayers, but they do have some prayers they say specifically. So yeah, and we'll get into that.
Is the commandment of mezuzah simply that you put them on your doorposts, or is it that you also touch them, kiss them, and pray?
I should have taken a bite. It's a good question. The mezuzah, it's the putting up a mezuzah and saying the blessing for affixing a mezuzah to your doorpost. Once you do that in your house, you're done. You've done the mitzvah. The touching is a minhag, is a custom.
I see.
Not all Jewish cultures do it. Ashkenazim do, for sure, though. I don't do it, by the way. Or I might do it the first time I enter a house, but I wouldn't do it every time I go through a door frame. But yeah, so these are the things they do. Okay, the Gemara is then like, that is a very interesting statement you made about all the things that women and slaves and kids are allowed or not allowed to do. So let's start with Kriyat Shema. The Mishnah says women are exempt from Kriyat Shema. And what does the Gemara say? Pshita! What does Pshita mean? You know what shoot means, right? You guys do Rashi. Like the simple surface level.
Oh, Pshat. Yeah, Pshat.
Pshat, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Same word, same root. Pshita means it's simple. How stupid you are to have even asked this question is what the rabbis mean when they say this. How stupid you are. Pshita. You should have gotten this. It's not a difficulty, right? It says here, that is obvious, is the translation. It's like, you should have known this already. With regard to Kriyat Shema, of course, women and slaves and kids don't do it. Why? Because there is a general rule, which many of you have probably heard, because mitzvat aseh shehazman gramahu, that it is a in other words, a hazman grama, and this is a time-bound mitzvah. And all positive, In other words, you must do. Positive mitzvot are you must do. Negative mitzvot are don't do this. So they're saying if it's positive, a positive mitzvah, and it's time bound, in other words, it has to be done at a certain time of day or season or whatever, then women and slaves and kids don't do them as a rule. They are exempt from all mitzvot she'asa grama, from all positive time-bound mitzvot. So any mitzvah you are commanded to affirmatively do, whose performance is only affected a particular time, you women and slaves and kids don't do. And since the Shema falls into that category, as its recitation is specifically in the morning and the evening, it says, why did it even need to mention it? We already know that it was obviously going to be something that, why even say that? Why not just say, women and slaves and kids are all time-bound positive mitzvot, or they're exempt. And then you'd know. So the Gemara has a question here. Why did we bring up Kriyat Shema? And why did we bring that up? Tefillin also, right? You get why. You wrap tefillin in the morning specifically. And you're commanded to specifically wrap tefillin. So that's also a positive time-bound mitzvah. And so the Gemara is going to say, why might you think that women would do Shema? By the way, there are a couple of time-bound positive mitzvot that women are obligated in, that slaves and children are not. Can you think of some? There are three, I think. I can think of two off the top of my head. I can look up the other one.
Lighting the Sabbath candle.
That's one. Lighting Shabbat candles on Friday night. You have to light the candles. It's positive. And it's time-bound. It has to be done within 18 minutes of sundown. But it's specifically in the Torah that they believe that this is something women should do. And therefore, it's a different rule for that. What is another one?
The bread.
Yes. Explain. I'll explain. Okay. So the bread. For challah, you don't just make a loaf of bread. Anyone who knows what a Jewish woman traditionally does when they make challah, what do? What does the word challah mean? What does it come from? It's not the name of the bread. We call it the bread because of the sacrifice. Because the challah sacrifice comes from the idea that when you bake the challah, the bread, you should take a bit of the dough and remove it. Some people will burn it then. Some people will wait and burn a bunch of them for Biur Chametz, right before Pesach, the day of their first Seder. But in either event, this is how, so that is also, they have to make it Friday because it's bread. It's got to be made around the day, around then. And they have to do this blessing over the removing of this bit of dough that is the challah offering. They have to do that, and it's a positive thing they do that's time-bound. So women are also obligated in that. They're obligated in the Shabbos candles. I think the other one is mikvah. I think the other one is mikvah, which is also time-bound and positive, and women are obligated in. So those are your three time-bound positive mitzvot that women are obligated in, that children and slaves are not.
Am I remembering correctly that the reason for the sacrifice of the challah, you give that to the evil eye, so it'll leave the rest alone?
I'm not going to be able to give you I'm not going to remember what this gets into, I start to call it Kabbalistic, and then I start to call it Shtuyot and Narishkeit, and then everyone gets mad at me.
Okay.
So I don't like any of that. It's fine. I don't know the answer. I don't know.
I don't know where that's coming from in my head, but I think I read that somewhere.
Hey, look, I believe you might have read that somewhere.
I dare you to cite the reference.
Yeah, if you give it to me, I'll try and look it up. Okay. So those are the things. Now I've given you a bunch of education. So the Gemara has something to say. It says, Mahu detemu, you might say, or you shouldn't say, but lest you say, since Shema includes, it says here, V'yikba malchut shamayim, that it takes, since the Shema includes the idea of the acceptance of the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, right? You say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, right? Then you say Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, right? You're saying God should have dominion forever.
Mhm.
Since all Jews are required to accept the yoke of heaven, it says perhaps women are obligated in its recitation, despite the fact that it's a time-bound positive mitzvah. The reason I gave you those exemptions earlier is we know there are exemptions to this rule. So, therefore, this is why it says it. The Mishnah tells us that women are exempt because otherwise someone might come and say that they're not. Makes sense to me, I guess. Then it says, we also learned in the Mishnah that women are exempt from tefillin. Pshita! This is obvious as well, right? It's you only wear tefillin during the day, not at night, only on weekdays, not on Shabbos, not on Yom Tov, right? On Shabbos morning, you don't put tefillin on. If you're there for Yom Tov, for a big formal, for a festival service or something, or high holy days, again, no tefillin. You'll never see me. I wear tefillin on other days, but if you come on Friday, Saturday, and Yom Tov, you're never going to see me wearing tefillin because we don't wear them then. So they're saying it is specific in its timing, and it's something you affirmatively do.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I thought that tefillin represented prayers. Why would you not have those for Shabbos?
Tefillin represent prayers, but we don't do request prayers on bakashot on Shabbat. So, for instance, when you sit down with me on Friday night and we do the Amidah, and we stand up and we do the Amidah, and we do the first three blessings of the Amidah together. We do Avot V'Imachot, we do Kvarot, and we do Kiddusha. And we do those, and then I say, continue on your own. You will notice that what you don't have is most of the Shemona Esrei. Most of the Amidah you don't have. Because of the 19 blessings, 13 of them are what are called bakashot. They ask God for things. They ask God for God to ingather the exiles and to give us a good year and to heal the sick and to clothe the naked. We're asking God for things. And we don't ask God for things on Shabbat. So if you read our book, here it is. If I open it to Shabbat morning, here we are, Shabbat morning. Let's see how they do. Right, so I've got it's Shabbat afternoon, but still it says Avot V'Imachot, Givorot, Kiddusha, Kiddushat Hayom, and then the final three blessings of the Amidah, Avodah, Hoda'ah, Shalom, and Tfilat Halev. If I go to the morning service for a weekday, instead of just Avot V'Imachot, Givorot, Kiddusha, and then Avodah, Hoda'ah, Shalom, and Tfilat Halev, there are all these other ones in here. There's Binah. Hold on, let me go over to it. Which ends Baruch Atah Adonai Chonen Hada'at, who graces us with knowledge. Baruch Atah Adonai Harotzeh B'Tshuvah. Blessed is God who welcomes repentance, who is abounding in forgiveness, who redeems Israel. Rofei HaCholim, who heals the sick. Mevarech HaShanim, who makes the year good for us. Podei HaShukim, who redeems the oppressed. We say all these bakashot, we don't say them on Shabbat. If you don't come not on Shabbat, you won't even know what we say. But we say these every other day. My point being, we don't say bakashot on Shabbat. We don't ask God for things. It is considered audacious on the day of rest to ask God to do things for you.
It's his day of rest.
Tefillin falls into that category. It contains bakashot. We don't engage in it on Shabbos. Also, wrapping oneself in things, I think, violates Shabbat as well. So we don't do any of that on Shabbat. Here it says, so again, the Gemara is going to ask, since we know this obviously would be, why would we bother saying that they're exempt from tefillin when we know they're exempt from tefillin already? And they say, lest you say, since the mitzvah of tefillin is juxtaposed in the Torah, is adjacent in the Torah, to the mitzvah of mezuzah, because it says in Deuteronomy, and we read this, you know this lines, and you shall bind them as a sign upon your hands, and they shall be for frontlets before your eyes. And then what does it say immediately after that? It says, and you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house and on your gates, which is where mezuzah comes from. So since women are obligated in mezuzah, and since it comes the line after tefillin, you might think that since women are obligated in mezuzah, that they are also obligated in tefillin. And the Gemara says, we said that, the Mishnah said that, so you wouldn't think that. So you know that women are not obligated in tefillin, even though they're obligated in mezuzah. Of course, mezuzah is not a time-bound commandment. Right? Because you could put it up anytime. I mean, not on Shabbos probably, because nailing something in is breaking Shabbos, but otherwise, it could be done on Thursday morning, it could be done on Wednesday afternoon. Doesn't really matter. We also learn that women, slaves, and children are obligated. There's a great book written by a teacher of mine, by the way, who has a book. She has a book called Women, Slaves, and Children, and it's about all of these restrictions, like all of these categories, and it's a brilliant book. Her name is Dr. Christine Garraway. Christine Garraway. She's very brilliant and was one of my professors at HUC. Okay. So we also learned that they are all obligated in tefillah, in prayer. The Gemara explains that although the mitzvah of prayer is only in effect at particular times, right? Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit, these are specific times you're supposed to do something affirmative. Therefore, they would be exempt. Although it's in effect only at particular times, which would lead to the conclusion that women are exempt, nevertheless, since prayer is supplication for mercy, and women also require divine mercy, they are obligated. However, lest you say, since regarding prayer, about prayer, it says evening and morning and after, right? Because it tells you when you're supposed to pray, and it's specific. And it comes from Psalms. Evening and morning and afternoon, I pray and cry aloud, and God hears my voice. It says, perhaps prayer should be considered a time-bound positive mitzvah, and therefore women should be exempt. So we needed the Mishnah to come in and say, even though you might think it's time, in this case it's reversed, even though you might think it's time-bound, actually the mitzvah of prayer is not time-bound, fundamentally, they're saying. And therefore, everyone is obligated, not just men.
The women don't have a seat at this.
No, women have no seat at this table.
So how is it conveyed to the women?
Through men, through their husbands, their teacher, their rabbis, their men say this is what it's going to be. It was 2,000 years ago. Ladies weren't quite so, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Today, it would be a real problem, yeah. Then, women were used to less. I don't know what to tell you. They were used to being told what to do, and they went along with it, is all I can assume. Today, less so, which is good. I'm not saying, but that's the answer, is essentially, it was imposed, and this is what everybody did. And they went along with it. Did every single woman in every time period in history go along with it? Probably not. We know that certain rabbis trained their daughters in things that they were not allowed to fill in, and reading Torah and all kinds of things they weren't allowed to do because they loved their daughters and saw that they were like them and smart, and they wanted to see what they could, they wanted to but those were all exceptions prior to the 20th century.
The men needed an explanation.
Yes, this is their explanation is it will get deeper into their explanation as to why women and slaves and children are exempt from time-bound positive mitzvot. But for women, I think that halachas would argue it was meant to be kind to the breakdown of labor in the household at the time. So women were responsible for putting together the meals, the raising the children, and essentially stabilizing the household. And that work was so onerous that to also expect them to, again, this is apologia, but this is the explanation as I understand it. I'm just labeling it as apologia so you understand and can wait in your own brain what I'm saying to you. The idea was that because they were so demanded upon, it was thought better that they not have to do these. It was thought a kindness to restrict these things from them.
I'd like to think that God says it's just as important or even more important to care for your children than to say a prayer.
That's certainly a very comforting thing for people who've been denied their religion to think.
Yes.
No, I can't be any less biting them. I can't. We can come up with all the apologia we want. We men are great. Sorry, Marcia. The rest of us are men, and therefore great at coming up with apologia for why we were terrible to women for 3,000 years. But the truth is, we were strong and powerful, and we did what we wanted, and they couldn't do anything because they were weak compared to us. We did it to other peoples. We did it to genders within our control. Humanity has been an exercise in domination, and we dominated them. That's the answer. These are great. These are very pretty words, though. I like these words a lot. They make me feel better. But they're also not tied to me in any way. I'm a Reformed Jew in the 21st century. I don't have nothing to do with these people besides hoping to glean their wisdom, what there is, and apply it to the modern world. So I don't feel the need to revere every single word they put down the way some people would, and therefore feel the need to apologize for them. I don't need to apologize for Rabbi Yochanan. He's responsible for his own nonsense. If he wants to sit outside the mikveh, I'm going to tell him he's being a creep. And if he says, but I'm the seed of Joseph and I don't, cool. I still think you're being a creep. You're a very pretty man. You don't need to do this. Go sit over there and talk to him the normal way. You know what I mean? Like we can all be respectful of our tradition and also be human beings that have reason and use that reason and apply it to history in a way that is logically consistent and reasonable. That's what I try and do. That's what I urge you to do as well. I'm still going to teach you the tradition because I'm a rabbi. And if I teach you the nonsense that comes out of my head, then I'm not a rabbi. I'm just a guy talking at you, which I am already, but when it's based in wisdom, it's not quite so crazy.
My Yiddish mama would describe it as Bubbemeisen.
That's what?
Bubbemeisen.
Yeah.
Which means just a story, made up story.
Yeah, it's just right. Narishkeit. Nonsense. And Narishkeit means nonsense. The culture of nonsense is right because Yiddishkeit means like Jewishness.
Bubblegate is made up by grandmothers.
Right. Right. But right. And this Narishkeit means foolishness or culture of foolishness. In any event, where we will wrap up is here. It says we also learned in the Mishnah that women are obligated in the mitzvah of mezuzah. The Gemara again we get pshita. Why would they be exempt from fulfilling the obligation, right? I just said to you before, it is a positive mitzvah, but mezuzah is not time-bound. You can do it anytime you want. So technically, according to our formulation, since it's not both, women are obligated, as we believe. The Gemara replies, you might say, but shouldn't. Here's the situation. Since the mitzvah of mezuzah is juxtaposed to in the Torah to the mitzvah of Torah study, just as women are exempt from Torah study, this is the same as the thing before, where because mezuzah was next to tefillin, you might assume that since they do mezuzah, they do tefillin. Here, you might assume they don't do mezuzah because they don't do Torah study. And once again, it's teaching us that though you might think that, you shouldn't. And that indeed, even though women are not obligated in Torah study, they are obligated in mezuzah. Now you say, why are they not obligated in Torah study? Again, I could rail against the rabbis, but I don't really want to. You get it, right? One who studies the Torah has influence over the Torah. One puts forward new ideas about the Torah. One involves the Torah in the Jewish understanding.
Mezuzah takes place at the home.
That's another
Torah
important
study.
thing. Mezuzah, but mezuzah also fits already neatly in because it's not time bound. It already fits neatly as a woman commandment. And there's one more of these. We also learned in the Mishnah that women are obligated to recite Birkat Hamazon. The Gemara says, again, Peshita. You might say, because in Exodus it says, when the Lord shall give you meat to eat in the evening and bread in the morning to the full, one might conclude that the Torah established fixed times for meals. That meals are fixed times, and therefore, if it's a positive, therefore, women wouldn't say Birkat Hamazon, right? So it says this specifically so we know that's not the case. Women are obligated in Birkat Hamazon. Again, it's in the home. It has to do with food and meals. It has to do with the woman's domain, and so we want her to participate in that aspect of religious life. It is very much, this is a section talking about what men are allowing women to do and not do, right? Notice how we're not really even talking about the slaves and the children in any of these sections, right? We started in the Mishnah by saying all three groups were exempt. But in our questioning about it, none of the rabbis really think there's a question about why slaves and kids don't do it. Why do they ask about women in each of these situations? Come on. I put it on the T for you.
It's a division of labor.
Okay, division of labor.
And dominance, power.
What percentage of society were slaves? Small. You don't have to know the number.
10%.
Less, probably. What percentage of society were children? I'll tell you. Doesn't matter, because most of them are too stupid to speak. No, they're under 13. Half that time they can't even speak. So it's not a question about whether slaves, who obviously have a whole other set of jobs and are mostly non-Jews, which why would they pray? Why would they do some of these things anyway? But Jewish slaves there were as well, and in that case, they were exempt because their duties precluded them from doing those things. Except for Jewish slaves, you had to let them go free after 7 years. For children, they're too stupid, and we're still teaching them. The rabbis understand something about women here that they're not willing to admit. The rabbis see women as able to do these things, where they don't think slaves and children are even able to do them. And so the question becomes that the rabbis have had to struggle with from the Mishnah until the 21st century is why, if we believe women are intellectually and reasonably capable of doing the same kind of religious observance as men, do we not allow them to?
Does it all go back to the apple?
Does it all go back to the apple? That's an interesting question. For some rabbis, the answer is yes. It's not so much an original sin problem as it is I don't know how to say this, and this is the internet, so I hope it doesn't get clipped, but to some extent they're kind of they have a less than full belief in the capability of women. It's not, and to some extent it's like a women have a proclivity to
Be careful.
be careful, mess things up. I think they probably think the second one more than the first one, for being honest. They don't want women in their club. They don't want women in the yeshiva. They don't want women at the table.
Yeah, if you start giving them rights, they'll be rabbis, my God.
Right, exactly. And there are some rabbis who will point to the women who went astray after Asherah, the women who, but to be fair, the rabbis will also say things like, it is for the honor of the women of the period of the Exodus that the Jewish people were redeemed in the first place. So the rabbis will put women on a pedestal above them, but only as a static marble thing for them to look at. Not as a woman, not as a human being that happens to have female secondary sex characteristics. That person is not capable. But the idealized woman, the Eshet Chayil, she's capable of the things we say she's capable of. She can do all of those great. And so we construct essentially a idealized Jewish womanhood, and then the rabbis, and then we set about a couple thousand years of trying to get Jewish women to fit this mold. And it worked for a really long time, I gotta say. It worked like gangbusters for like 2,800 years. They did great with that model, but nothing lasts forever. And I think in the end is probably for the best. 1 second. Before we continue, I just want to thank everyone for coming online. If you like this fiery version of Talmud study, and I promise we're pretty traditional most of the time. And we have great reverence for the rabbis.